One of the reasons why I thought we should have this conversation is your father, the late Enos Chiura, who was a role model to me, who, when I was a journalist, would call me up, and when I got things wrong, he would say, "Mningina, chimbuya kunoku," and then I would drive from Charter Road to Delta Corporation, and then he would sit me down and say, "You got it here, you got it wrong here." And then afterwards, we get up, either we have a meal in the boardroom or we have a cup of coffee, and he'd walk me through. He was very patient with me. He taught me a lot. Your father represents a generation which unfortunately we're losing, but a generation which for a lot of us were role models. And I'm just going to run a couple of names. Charles Utete, Bernard Chidzero, Ariston Chambati, Professor Kahari, Dr. Sadza, my former boss, Elias Rusike, Dr. Robin Pause, Sem Gozo. You had an amazing father, amazing pedigree. Tell me about the man and your relationship with the man.
You know, he was, as you correctly say, he was an amazing, amazing human being. Sorry, I'm going to get a little emotional here. Sunday was the first Father's Day without him, so it was a little difficult. But this is a man who most people don't know, who grew up in a village. He started in a village, went to sort of got through the standard 6 that you were allowed to get through at that time, and the only thing that was available to him at the time was carpentry. So he was a carpenter, and after doing carpentry, he because he always wanted to further himself, became a teacher, and through the teaching, studied, and eventually got acceptance to the University of Zimbabwe. And he was a much older student. In fact, I remember when the late John Robertson passed away last year, he was my father's classmate, but yet my father was probably 10 years older than he was. And that's how it was. So from there, he ended up going to, getting a scholarship to go to university in Manchester, where he did a master's degree. And that's where I started school. At the time, I was an only child. And
there's two of you.
There are two of us. I have a younger brother, Munyaradzi, yes.
Where is Munyaradzi?
He's here. He's local. He works for an edutech, US-based edutech company. And then we came back, and then my father started at National Breweries and literally rose through the ranks, and eventually becoming chairman of that company. But growing up in that man's house, he was extremely strict, as was my mother. My mother was the ultimate disciplinarian. When things had to be handled, it was my mother that handled them. And I was a handful. And I apologize to my mother now. I'm sorry. I hope I made up for it. I was a handful, but they were patient. I mean, they really understood the long game. And I think as parents, that's something we really have to understand, that not all of us mature at the same time. Some take a little longer than others. I think, my wife would be a better person to state this, but I believe that the male brain finally achieves full maturity at about age 25. So be patient with, especially your sons, but be patient with your children. And my patients were very patient. Yeah.
I mean, you say he played the long game, they played the long game. I mean, look at where he started. Then getting an economics degree from the University of Zimbabwe, and then getting a scholarship to go outside. Tell me, what lessons have you held on, imparted to you by your dad?
Probably the biggest one is to never let anybody else define who you are. They tried to throw him in a box on multiple occasions. You can't do this. You're black. You can't do that. You haven't enough of this. You can't do that. And I've taken that same lesson throughout my life. I mean, when I think about my medical journey in the United States, getting into medical school as a foreigner at the time was very, very difficult. And they told me when I was in undergrad, saying, "You're never going to get in. Don't even apply." I applied. I got in. When I finished as I was finishing medical school, I wanted to be a urologist. They said, foreigners don't get urology positions. It doesn't happen. I applied and I got in. So the moral of that story is never let anyone tell you what you cannot do. And I took that directly from my father.